I am so delighted to have Dr. Auger, I'm going to call you Jerry, with me today. So, he's an adjunct professor in the Department of Cyber and Computer Sciences at the Citadel. He's a content creator, which is how I came across him. So, be sure to subscribe to his cybersecurity live streams that he does every day at simplycyber.io. So, really, he brings information security related content to help IT or InfoSec professionals really take their career further and do it faster. So, he's a cybersecurity SME, a guru of sorts, but he also spent some time supporting the defense industrial
Yeah,
base.
absolutely. 100% pumped to be here. Super excited to share some experiences, share some stories, maybe a couple laughs, and just have a great conversation.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so I teased your background a little bit, but I think it's really important for our audience, which is obviously a large portion of the cleared population, but also those just kind of trying to break into this space. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about your story and how, one, you were able to break into defense, because that's one of the biggest questions I get, and maybe some reasons why you left, because you're obviously not here anymore.
Yeah, 100%. So, you know, so I've been in the industry for about 20 years, but the way that it originally started, I graduated university with a computer science degree. I was a software engineer because I thought that was the only job you could get with that degree. Spoiler alert, there's much bigger. But I started working and looking. I was in Massachusetts and I was looking for work and I found like some small software gig, like an in-house, business application type thing, whatever. It wasn't very rewarding work. And I was doing that. And then I found out about through a family friend about work in DC. And I knew that obviously, Washington, DC, the capital, the Pentagon, Department of Defense, like all these things are going on down there. And because of that, I started looking around through a network connection. So networking is incredibly valuable. I absolutely will not pretend that I got the job exclusively on my technical acumen. Although, I mean, I did have it and needed it. Went down to DC. Um, this time frame was like 2004, 2005. So for your viewers and listeners who are not familiar, there was a massive issue that happened in the United States around that time between with Enron and Tyco. And what ended up happening, some of the fallout from that was that the big four accounting firms could not also be doing professional services work, and they ended up splintering out. And there was a company called Bearing Point, which is bankrupt now. That was the spinoff of KPMG Consulting. So essentially, there was the accounting arm, and then Bearing Point was the consulting arm. And they had a bunch of contracts and everything. And I ended up scooping into there and moved. And that was a big decision too, because I was dating my girlfriend, who became my wife. Okay. So like, I'm not just some, romantic here. But like when you're, 22, 23, 24, whatever, like moving away is kind of a big deal and can kind of terminate relationships. But I said, listen, I need to do this. This is a huge opportunity. Working for the Marine Corps at the time, building software, lots of opportunity, and a huge pay raise and stuff like that. So that's how I ended up breaking in, quote unquote, into the defense industrial base. I did not need a clearance at that particular time. I do end up getting one later when I start doing work again with the Marine Corps, ironically, but in a different capacity.
Well, that's really interesting to hear, because when folks are the biggest question or answer from myself when you're trying to break into this space, you need to follow where the demand is for talent, and you need to be okay and flexible with some of those requirements. And so, I mean, that's also interesting to hear that you broke into this space not needing a clearance and eventually got one, because that's the other thing I say, like, if you're a candidate looking for work in the cleared space, don't go after the top secret with some sensitive compartmented information jobs. Like, try to get your foot in the door a different way. So it sounds like that's kind of what you did.
Yeah, it's 100% what I did, and again, I was really fortunate because I was a software developer and got in and got work that way through basically. There's probably still a lot of software jobs. I mostly help people get cyber work, but there's probably still a lot of software jobs because the project that I got brought onto was basically like a revitalization transformation project. Right? You've got all this old tech from the 70s. The Marine Corps, in this case, had become dependent on that technology and the service it provided, the capability it allowed. But it wasn't really scalable. It didn't really age well. So they were basically rebuilding a new solution based on the existing needs of that current solution. And that type of work's never going to go anywhere because there's all sorts of homegrown. Ransomware is the number one threat targeting basically businesses and governments, um, especially in the United States, but really everyone's a victim. And it's essentially a for-profit crime where a threat actor breaks into your environment. They steal all your data, first of all, so they have a copy of it now. And then two, they use encryption to lock all your data. So imagine I break into your house, Katie, and I take all your personal files and photos and I stick them in a safe and I lock the safe and I leave the safe in your living room with a note that says, "Hi, I'm Jerry. I did this and I have the keys. I'll sell you the key. I'll mail it back to your house for $200,000. On average, it's like 3 to 7% of your annual revenues for those listening who want to get an idea of what the ransom is. But basically, they're extorting you to give you access back to your files. Now, you might say, "Oh, I've got backups. I'll just rebuild." That's fine. Most times they delete the backups before you get them, before they encrypt them. I'll give you like the juice right now, right? So number one, if you allow me, Katie, like the opportunity to go a little bit deeper on this one, I would like to give you kind of like 3 actionable tips that are at the macro level. And then I want to give you 3 actionable tips at the micro level. Okay. So none of this is going to be just vague pontificating. And you're like, what's this guy talking about? Okay. So at the macro level, the very first thing you need to do is you have to have some background on IT, right? Like not every role is IT focused, but like if you don't know how 2 computers talk to each other, i.e. networking, you can't possibly understand how a machine can get compromised or how a threat actor can move around an environment. Like you just need it, right? And then operating systems, and you don't have to be like a computer science grad level operating systems, but you do need to understand like how a computer works. Like when you launch an application on your computer, like you're in user land, but it needs to access hardware underneath, like the memory and the processor. Like how's that magic happening? Like if you don't understand that at that level, you're going to have a tough time. So like I would just say like you have to understand tech somewhat before you can really enter into look cyber. At the DoD 8570, there's certain certs that you got to get and stuff like that. So they are motivated to hire those individuals if they can get them through the screening process. That's another part of it, right? Like when the hiring manager who wants to hire an entry level person, if they can't get to the person because they're being screened out through ATS or through automatic tracking systems or applicant tracking systems or HR who screens them out, this is causing a problem, which by the way is why you need to do networking, right? So you find out about jobs and you bypass all those situations. Another thing that gets in there, and this gets back to what I was saying before, there is a misnomer of the term entry level for cybersecurity because you do require that technical background. A lot of times entry level cyber job is actually like 2 to 3 years IT job. You know what I mean? Like there's like a step there that is just like assumed you have. And unfortunately that terminology of entry level is misleading. And unfortunately it's the one thing, or it's probably one of the number one things that frustrates candidates the most because they're like, like it says entry level, but then it says I need like 3 years of experience. This is messed up. So there's a lot of blame to go around. I will say though, for me personally, I think audit work is, I'm a huge GRC person. GRC, for those who don't know, is a dimension of information security. There's like offensive, defensive GRC. So for me, audit work is like the base skill of a GRC analyst, which means it's like the most entry level of skills. You don't have to have super technical chops to do it. And because of FISMA, a federal act that requires all federal systems maintain some minimum level of cybersecurity standard, and they need to be independently validated. There is a ton of work for that type of audit work. And I think that that's a phenomenal way. I did that work for like 6 years. It migrated from audit to risk to management. But anyways, I was in that world for 6 years and had amazing opportunity with Booz Allen. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, you supported the Marine Corps, but initially doing this audit work. So for those listening, that sounds like it can be a really least amount of resistance, I suppose, when because it's not easy, it's really not. But let's kind of continue on cyber issues that are affecting the business side. So, CMMC, I don't
Mm.
know if anybody's heard it, but the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Framework. It helps to assess defense contractors' compliance with cybersecurity requirements just to protect contract data, controlled unclassified information, continue, and also from continued adversarial threats and other cyber attacks. So CMMC has gone through the journey, I suppose, and a lot of people don't really know what's going on, but it's been a hot topic amongst stakeholders in the defense industrial base. So I'd really love to get your thoughts on that, and a few other things like how to prevent a cyber attack, how to find your data leaks before an adversary do. So let's talk about kind of from the business side as opposed to the job seeker side, some of those cyber hot topics today.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you said hot topic CMMC, I thought you were going to say hot mess CMMC.
Yeah.
And those,
Quite the journey.
yeah, yeah. Like, thank God they rebooted it and didn't move forward with the original implementation. So CMMC, again, from an employer perspective, but this will be beneficial for job seekers if you're still listening. With CMMC, you will need to maintain a minimum level of cybersecurity. So you can't just be YOLO all over the place and focused on, closing deals and getting business and just executing work, because the federal government understands that there's a risk exposure here. Essentially, your small business, your large business, whatever, your government contractor business, you're a third party risk to the U.S. government. And you mentioned some other things around protecting information and stuff like that. But like, if a employee of insert government contractor here, if you right now listening, if your computer gets infected because whatever, it's your work computer and you let your kid use it and they downloaded a free Fortnite skin or something, when you bring that machine onto base and you plug it into the network, your machine's been cleared, but now you're potentially introducing malicious stuff to the environment. But had your machine been CMMC compliant, like the rest of the infrastructure at your government contractor business, then there's some level of assurance that that kind of risk would be mitigated. That's why the government's doing it, and it totally makes sense. You will need somebody on staff to help you with this. You cannot just be like, oh, we're CMMC and just like you can't go to Staples and buy an $8 stamp that says CMMC approved and stamp everything.
Yeah, no, great metaphors, great conversation. And so at this point, I'm actually going to be copycatting you. It's the biggest form of flattery. And I saw on one of your streams, you were running through some, recent headlines and kind of giving your thoughts. And so I thought that we would discuss a couple of headlines today. I am not the technical person, so I want to hear yours, and I might not have as much to offer. But
okay.
I'm focusing on the FBI with this one. So the FBI was warning about adversaries. So the first one came from Info Security magazine. The FBI recently issued an alert on Russian threats targeting routers. So tell us, about kind of generally the importance of, cyber hygiene from, a user and a company standpoint, using a VPN, et cetera, kind of in relation to that recent headline.
Yeah. So when you see FBI advises, I mean, one of the first things you should do if you're a non-technical person listening to this, typically the FBI will have like a non-nerd version for people to consume, so you can do something about it. But as far as attacking the router, one thing that you gotta understand, again, getting back to like the internet, right? Understanding networking. One thing you've got to understand is that basically there's only one internet. Okay, like. And I know that sounds very simple-minded and like obvious, but think about it for a second. Like, Russia is attacking Ukraine. Like, there are nation-state threat actors everywhere. There's billions of dollars in financial fraud being committed across the internet. And then like you and I are buying yoga mats on Amazon. Like, it's the same internet. There's one internet. We only got one. And it's an incredibly hostile place. Many of us get to live in like a bubble, unbeknownst to like all of the realities going on. It's like walking down a street in a war zone, and you just like in your view, like it's rainbows and sunshine, and like in reality, there's like bullets flying around. So that's the reality to kind of set the stage. So when you think about that, that means a threat actor in Cambodia can just as easily access your Facebook, or, try to connect with you on Facebook, or connect with you on Instagram, or connect with you on Snapchat, the same as the person who you just met for coffee earlier today can connect with you, right? So because of that access, geographical distances, geographical boundaries make no difference now. So a threat actor, in this case, as the FBI pointed out, they said Russia, but it could be anyone, is scanning the internet. Another thing to point out about the internet, the IP address ranges, like, oh, hey, here's my IP, 10.7.13.22, whatever. Like, there is a finite set. Okay, it goes from 0.0.0.0 to 255, 255, 255, which means it'll take you a while, but you can count 0001, 0002, all the way up into 255 across, and then start over. And that's what threat actors do. They, in good guys,
we actually recently attended an event with Christopher Wray, but he gave the warning as intelligence chiefs and politicians met at the Munich annual security conference recently. So any thoughts on this, as we're, kind of moving on to adversaries? The name doesn't matter, but any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, well, this particular one is much more nation state security, or national security, simply because the example we just spoke about was like you protecting your business, you protecting your family. You have a personal vested interest in protecting your home, right? In this other instance, basically imagine all of these devices strewn about, small businesses that are doing retail shops, personal homes, etc., whatever, vacation Airbnbs, whatever. What they're saying in this particular story is that those assets, which again can be enumerated across the internet through a scan, are being popped and taken over. And basically the threat actors in this instance are just laying dormant, essentially setting up an entire network of systems that they could activate in a moment's notice. I guess the closest thing I could think of is, imagine tens of thousands of sleeper cells that could be activated at one instance if the nation state that controls those sleeper cells decided it's time to go hot and go live. And then, obviously, the call is coming from inside the house at that point, and you're like, what am I going to do? So it is a bit scary. And with that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the dilution of responsibility, right? Oh, my house, my router, my network, my family, I want to fix it. With this other one, this dilution, you're like, well, it's my, Jerry's knit shop down on Main Street. Like, yeah, I probably could pay someone to fix it or whatever, but like, who's gonna, like, I'm too small. No one's gonna steal it. No one's gonna break in. And is it really my responsibility? Like, doesn't Comcast or AT&T supposed to be responsible for that? It's not my problem. So that it becomes this like diffusion of responsibility, which, further increases into that. So yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Chris Wray is right.
Well, and that's a great point that could be applied to a number of things. I just had a thought. Remember that silly balloon? I mean, not so silly, but man, what a journey we've been on even since then. And so this last one, it's, talking about a different sector, but as we know, critical infrastructure is, something that should be in everyone's interest. So the FBI warns that healthcare sector is a target of ransomware attacks. And so why is the healthcare industry another major target? And then for those who aren't listening, I don't know what rock you've been living under, but help explain what ransomware attacks are.
Oh, sure. So ransomware is the number one threat targeting basically businesses and governments, especially in the United States, but really everyone's a victim. And it's essentially a for-profit crime where a threat actor breaks into your environment. They steal all your data, first of all, so they have a copy of it now. And then two, they use encryption to lock all your data. So imagine I break into your house, Katie, and I take all your personal files and photos and I stick them in a safe and I lock the safe. And I leave the safe in your living room with a note that says, "Hi, I'm Jerry. I did this and I have the keys. I'll sell you the key. I'll mail it back to your house for $200,000. On average, it's like 3 to 7% of your annual revenues for those listening who want to get an idea of what the ransom is. But basically, they're extorting you to give you access back to your files. Now, you might say, oh, I've got backups. I'll just rebuild. That's fine. Most times they delete the backups before you get them, before they encrypt them. It's possible you don't get the keys. Some agencies aren't allowed to pay because it's literally funding terrorism, so it's illegal. And then in other instances,
My
say you don't
paycheck
pay,
stops coming.
bro. Like I'm gonna go work somewhere else. With all due respect, I totally get it. I'm sorry, but that's the impact. So it's a staggering impact of like we can't bill for you touching this patient, so it means the insurance isn't going to give us money for that, which means we can't pay you. How long can you go without a paycheck? And not just one doctor, but literally the entire healthcare system, right? Which again, it's so big that if it falls, it's dramatic. And the threat actors know this. And because they have the keys they'll sell you, there's no reason for you not to buy it. It's like when the government was like bailing out banks. Oh, they're too big to fail. The same thing's happening here. The threat actors are like, oh, well, I mean, if we shut the lights off on this healthcare and it kills 300 people, they can't possibly allow that to happen. So here's some easy money. Let's score. And by the way, most threat actors who do ransomware are not Americans. Americans are seen as like juicy fat targets because we have lots of money and we're lazy and we're American, and this is the perspective of threat actors. But my point is that is why, in conclusion, Katie, that is why healthcare is at serious risk, and why we've seen it just recently. Change Healthcare got hit, and part of that impact was that their pharmaceutical system, which tons of hospitals relied upon, was not accessible. So if you had some life-threatening disease, you had lupus, you had diabetes, you had whatever, you could not go get your prescription filled because the system couldn't tell them that, yes, Katie has this prescription and Jerry does not. So you can't have like basically pharmaceutical fraud, or else you'd have everybody walking up being like, hi, I'm here for my Oxycontin
Right.
prescription. Trust me, So yeah, it's a hot mess.
Well, and hopefully instead of feeling scared from that last one, you feel motivated. And this is why, cybersecurity talent is just so critically important. And so, Jerry, Dr. Gerald
Mm-hmm.
Auger, thank you so much for joining me today. Most important, thanks to everyone who listened or watched this episode. And so I wanted to end on the importance of sharing content. I'd love you put out a lot of content, so I'd love for you to tease to that here and offer you any space if you had closing thoughts for our listeners.
Yeah, hopefully you guys aren't scared, but you are inspired and excited. There is a lot of opportunity for cyber work, believe me, but it's not an easy journey, okay? And if you are a business owner and you don't know how to get help with cyber, like there's a lot of free resources out there for small businesses. Go look at CISA.gov, like CISA.gov. They have resources for small businesses. Even if you just do a little bit to like elevate the bar, then you're in a better position than you were. And I would say, like, at an absolute minimum, put multi-factor authentication on all your accounts, all of them. I can't emphasize this enough, okay? Especially your email, because guess what? If I break into your email, I can go reset your passwords to everything else because, surprise, they send an email to you to confirm that you wanted to reset your password. So that's not going to stop you. You need multi-factor authentication all over the place. And also, not to scare you, this is super specific, but if you're taking photos of your password backups, right? Like everybody does this. You take a photo of like your emergency passwords because it's like 15 words. Guess what? Those photos are saved up in your iCloud. And when threat actors break into that, they literally sort by pictures and scan because it takes like 10 seconds to scan all your pics. Pic of you doing a selfie, not interesting. A pic of a random notebook page, totally interesting. Okay. So those are final thoughts on that. I will say that at Simply Cyber, if you like my style, you like what I'm saying, or you just want to get some cyber intel, every single morning at weekday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour. I've done it for 578 days in a row. I go live with about 600 other professionals in cybersecurity, and I break down the top cybersecurity news stories, just like the FBI story I did, and give actionable intel how you can use it. So it's basically like this, what we just did on this show, except every day.